School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McRae?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I'd just like, can you hear that? Good evening. I'd like to start with a message. As president of the Wilson School Board, can you hear me okay? Very loud. Can you hear me now? Okay. As president of the Wilson School Board, I want to directly address a narrative that has led to certain members of the community questioning our teachers' motivation and interactions with students. I want our staff to know that I value and trust each of you as professional educators. Your job is an easy one. It is not an easy one, especially during these challenging times. However, you continue to prove that you are not just teaching content, but you're also developing relationships with children that teach them how to become critical thinkers and help them grow as individuals. It has become abundantly evident over the past several months that there is a difference of opinion in our community about what the topics and issues should be addressed in the classroom. Our district strives to teach students how to think and not what to think. I firmly believe that when we do this, we continue to create and maintain a district culture and climate that focuses on all children. I believe that it is important that when parents have questions about a lesson in the classroom, they should reach out to the teacher directly and have their questions answered. Our school district continues to reach excellence as a direct result of the relationships that our administration and staff forge with the community despite the differences of opinions that exist. I thank you for all that you do on a daily basis. It is truly appreciated. Thank you. Ms. Moravich, we do not have anybody on agenda items. We have 10 non-agenda items.
Okay, so all right to defer the rules until the non-agenda items.
Thank you. Dr. Faley, Community Good News.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Hart. It's my pleasure this evening to share a bit of good news this evening. Tonight, I would like to recognize our Wilson Media Department student volunteers and interns for all of their hard work and support. These high school students are under the direction of Matt Citrone. This dedicated team is the first to arrive at our board meetings and the last ones to leave. They make sure that our meetings are live streamed and the audio is working each meeting. In addition, they also provide our live stream for our home football games. They do a great job, and their efforts were recently recognized through an email sent to Mr. Citrone after the recent Mannheim Central game. The email reads, "Hi Matt, I am a band mom for Mannheim Central. Since I couldn't make the game on Friday night, I settled in to watch the live stream. When halftime rolled around, I was totally ready to see nothing for 15 minutes, as other schools we have played have done. I was very pleasantly surprised when you showed the marching band show. Maybe you know, or maybe you don't, but our marching band kids work very hard to put together a quality show. It meant the world to me to be able to watch my saxophone player. Thank you so very much. All the best, Sandy White, mom of Emily, the alto sax player." Thank you, Mr. Citrone and the Wilson Media Production student volunteers for all that you do, not only for our community, but for other communities as well. I'm sure that this parent will never forget that opportunity when she couldn't come to the game to be able to see her Emily, the alto sax player for Mannheim Central, participate in their marching band show.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. The board did meet in executive session this evening about real estate. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on September 20th, 2021 as attached.
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, do you have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight. Let's see if I can get this. I'm a little behind schedule here. The bills in the amount of $6,514,450.70.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, President Hart. Before I make my recommendations this evening, I'd like to introduce our Supervisor of K-8 Curriculum and Instruction. She was approved at our last board meeting, Angie Mistifer. I know you're here this evening. Can you please stand up and be recognized, and congratulations on your promotion to Supervisor of K-8 Curriculum. So with that said, I present the superintendent's report, personnel program recommendations for board consideration.
Thank you. Looking for motion to approve the superintendent's report items 4.2 through 4.9 as presented.
So
Cocker.
moved. Case?
Mrs. Cocker first, second Mr. Case. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Same.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
That's 8 yes, 0 no, 1 abstain.
Ratification and approval of the following field trips. Mrs. Cocker.
5.1, request permission to approve a trip to Disney World for 110 concert choir, symphonic band, orchestra, and theater students from April 10th to April 15th, 2022. The cost of the students is approximately $1,949. This includes cancel for any reason trip insurance. The cost of the district is 4 substitute teachers for 2 days. Students will be chaperoned by Mrs. Fredericks, Mrs. Kuhn, Mr. Cooper, and Mrs. Lennon. 5.2, request permission to approve a trip to St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica for 24 high school AP Environmental, AP Bio students from January 31st, 2022 to February 4th, 2022, 4 days out of school. Approximate cost to the students is $2,300. Cost to the district is 8 substitute teachers for 4 days. Students will be chaperoned by Mr. Doms, other chaperones to be determined.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve the field trips agenda items 5.1 and 5.2 as presented.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider first. Do you have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, any discussion?
Yes, President Hart. I'm just curious why, with 5.2, the same cancel for any reason trip insurance is not included in that cost. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that can go into play between now and that trip.
It is my understanding, Mr. Negrini, that that same cancel for any reason insurance does exist for both trips.
Okay.
My apologies for not putting that on the agenda.
All right, very good. Thank you.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion?
It's just great to see these trips back on the agenda and getting a little bit back to normal, so appreciate it. Thanks for supporting that as an administration team.
Roll call, please. I'm sorry, voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Under consent items, Mrs. Cocker.
6.1, request to accept with gratitude the donations from T-Mobile, 500 lunches for our staff. The lunches were served outdoors during the District Professional Development Day on Friday, September 24th, 2021. From Southern Middle School PTO, a check in the amount of $1,000 to be used for Southern Middle School's Carnival held on October 1st, 2021. And from Weiss Market, a check in the amount of $400 to be used for supplies for students at Spring Ridge Elementary School.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second? Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Under Human Resources, 7.1, request approval to increase daily substitute rates, teacher substitute rates from $140 to $175 for non-retired teachers and $170 to $200 for retired teachers. 7.2, request approval for one part-time substitute scheduler with a maximum of 20 hours per week to assist with obtaining building coverage for daily, short coverage daily. Substitute coverage, thank you. Looking for a motion to approve agenda item 7.1 and 7.2 as presented.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper first, do you have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nicarini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 8.1, request permission to create a high school girls soccer student activity count in the High School Student Activities Fund. Looking for a motion?
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Snyder first, do you have a second?
Martin seconds.
Mr. Martin, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Nicarini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Committee Reports, 11.1, Berkeley Career and Technology Center. Mrs. Casper.
Yes, thank you, President Hart. I have a lot to report. Our last meeting was held at the West Campus on September 22nd. This was the first meeting that we were once again graced with dinner prepared by our students in the BCTC Culinary Arts program since pre-pandemic, so this was quite the treat. I also wanted to re-emphasize what I had previously reported about CTCs entering into TAP, or Technical Assistance Program, with the Pennsylvania Department of Education, PDE, for the 2021-2022 school year. We were given the scheduling specifications, which were developed as part of a required corrective action. So I wanted to just read it so that community members are aware of some of the modifications for what's going on this year. So the purpose is to improve instructional continuity, increase CTE instructional time, and to raise student achievement levels. The following scheduling specifications have been developed for students who are enrolled in an approved CTE program at BCTC. Provide a minimum of 2.5 hours or more of CTE instructional time. AM session students to be in class as close to 8 a.m. as possible, earliest 7:45 a.m., and remain in their assigned CTE program until at least 10:30 a.m. or later. PM session students to be in class as close to 12 noon, earliest 11:45, and remain in their assigned CTE program until at least 2:30 p.m. or later. Lunch at BCTC is an option for all district students scheduled to eat at BCTC between the time of 10:30 a.m. and 12 noon. Students shall be provided a 20-minute lunch period. Students enrolled in a CTE program shall complete a rigorous academic course sequence while in high school, college prep sequence or equivalent, be heterogeneously scheduled in academic classes with other non-CTC students, and the districts will all strive to establish a common calendar. All CTC students will follow the approved BCTC calendar on conflict days. So I just wanted to read that so that it was clear. Some of the survey data was shared with the JOC members from the 2020-2021 school year to inform improvement. So I just wanted to highlight a few things, a few of the items that struck me, and I did share the PowerPoint. The first one, which was actually not included in the official survey data, but was shared with the JOC members via an email, was actually one of my very own Penn State Berkeley students, her work in an assignment that she submitted about 2 weeks ago, where she raved about her BCTC experiences and specifically claimed that if it were not because of her experiences at BCTC, in her early childhood education teacher specifically, she would not be in college. So although this student's sending school was not Wilson, I wanted to highlight that her experiences are a testament to the value of a BCTC education and sheds light on the fact that a CTC experience can transcend into any career path, not just a vocational one. Another slide that struck me from the survey data was the survey soliciting parents opportunities where BCTC can improve. There was no data from parents, meaning most parents did not submit any feedback. I thought this was a bit disheartening given how taxing last year was for many parents having to juggle either working from home or having children schooling from home. I hope more parents will continue to make their perspectives heard as it relates to their BCTC students' education. And then finally, I wanted to announce BCTC's upcoming open house on November 10th and the 11th. And this is a good time for parents to check out the website for some more details. And it's an ideal time if you have students in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade to begin exploring their careers, and they should have some working knowledge of all that BCTC has to offer, regardless of their child's plans, whether it includes college, technical school, or starting a career after graduation. BCTC provides an excellent foundation. So our next meeting will be on Wednesday, October the 27th at the East Campus, and that's my report.
Thank you. Student Services, Dr. Hoffert.
Good evening, thank you. My report tonight will include an update on our Equity Policy Committee workshop that occurred last week. The policy workshop was held this past Tuesday evening in the boardroom. We had 33 total participants engaged in discussion at the tables with board members spread among the groups as observers. The breakdown of the participants included the following. There were 17 community members, 11 of whom currently have children in the district. There were 10 teachers who are currently employed by Wilson, 2 support staff members who are currently employed by Wilson, and then 4 students, although we had 3 additional students who had committed but then had things come up and weren't able to attend that evening. The majority of our board members were in attendance, as I mentioned. It was encouraging to hear the dialogue and discussion, and we received a lot of positive feedback from those that were in attendance. The evening started off with some collaboration on the definition of equity in education, and then shifted to small group discussions about each of the 6 sections of the first draft of the equity policy. The next step in our process will be to combine the revisions and feedback into a new draft of the policy that will be shared with the board for a reading at the next board meeting. That's our hope. The meeting schedule for the Student Services Committee has not yet been finalized, but that will be published on the district website once those dates are established. That's my report.
Thank you. Berks County IU, Dr. Kennedy.
The IU has not met since the last time we had a meeting, but I do have a curriculum committee report.
Great, go ahead.
We started off the curriculum committee meeting talking about non-college bound students and different pathways that they have in our school. We talked about encouraging attendance at the BCTC. Then we heard from our high school English, social studies, and reading departments from the head of each of those departments. Dr. Reese is our social studies chair, and he talked about our social studies curriculum and how it is aligned to the state standards, and they're following best practice instead of just presenting a list of dates chronologically, that they're talking about themes within social studies. And I did speak with some of our professors up at the college, and they did confirm that that is the best practice in social studies, is to talk about themes and not just have a history of dates. Dr. Reese said the curriculum is meant to prepare students to participate in understanding multiple perspectives and to make informed decisions about their world. And he was very adamant that social studies should be more than a memorization of facts. It should be an analysis of individuals or groups' choices and their interactions. Ms. Renix, the English department chair, spoke about our high school English curriculum. She gave us an example of the 11th grade high school English curriculum and how that came to be. She stated that she wanted to create an environment where students are empowered to create their own future through reading, writing, and speaking. And the courses, again, revolve around having a different perspective and not about convincing people their perspective are wrong, but to be able to support your perspective with evidence and facts. We heard from Mrs. Case, who is our reading department chair, and she talked about the process for choosing books for our students and for our book clubs. We talked about elementary field trips, and unfortunately some of our field trips are going to have to be changed because of just staffing and different issues. So they're going to keep us updated on that. And then professional learning, we talked about PD days with Dr. Stout, and she gave us a list of the topics that had happened throughout this year, and the planned topics for this year and the topics that happened last year. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Berkeley CIT, Mr. Schlossman. Oh, hold on a minute.
Ma'am, you have to put a mask on. Ma'am, you need to put a mask on.
Yeah, it's already been addressed.
Then you have to leave. That's the board policy. You have to be wearing a mask. We can proceed.
Thank you. Berkeley CIT, Mr. Schlossman.
Good evening. The Berks Tax Collection Committee met on September 23rd, and we reviewed their calendar year financial statements. For September, they had earned income tax distributions to municipalities and school districts totaling $109 million year-to-date, or a 1.5% increase over the prior year, which is a really good trend. However, the local services tax distributions were down 1% at $4.5 million compared to the year before. The new tax collection software continues to provide more efficiencies as reported in the past, and processing and faster cash flow to its municipal and school district members is occurring. The larger payroll processing companies are now using ACH for payment, which has also increased efficiencies of processing. The last areas of the software to be programmed are the per capita tax collection and the business privilege tax collection, with a target completion date of September 22nd. And our next quarterly meeting is scheduled for December 16th, in which we will be reviewing and approving the calendar year budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
Yes, we have not had an extracurricular committee meeting since the last board meeting, but our next, it's scheduled for next Monday, but since there's no school Tuesday? Okay, so Tuesday at noon. And that's my report.
Thank you. Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
Our next meeting is October 25th at 4:30.
Finance Committee, Mr. Martin.
Yes, we met tonight at 4:30 in this room to discuss the food services, the annual audit status, financial updates, general fund, and executive session. And basically, food services was a pretty positive presentation. They're almost back to normal. Last year was an aberration because of COVID, but it appears that they're on the right track to regain the status that they had prior to COVID. The annual audit is still in progress and that is progressing well. We also talked about all the events last year that caused our budget at that point in time. We weren't sure what our budget would look like, so we did our best, and luckily for us, we have excess revenues this year that we can now rebuild some of our reserves. We had good collections with our local earned income tax. Everything was actually above what was expected, so we do have some funds, and at the next board meeting on the 18th, we will be making a recommendation to take $1 million of those X funds and put it into capital projects budget. We also talked about briefly about year-to-date financials, and it's really nothing much to say, so it's just a couple of months. And we also talked about we're going to be proposing to the board on the October 8th meeting to opt out of the the index, because right now we were going to look at the adjusted index will be sufficient, and I believe, if I remember correctly, because of the way our special education kind of came in below last year's, that we wouldn't necessarily be able to apply for exemption. So that will be on the board also. And then we did have an executive session to discuss real estate. That's my report.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Really not much going on from the standpoint of overall legislation. There's a lot of things in committees, from charter schools to election reform, but there's nothing in the near future going to be voted on either of those.
Thank you. Under Human Resources, no report. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Yes, thank you. I just have a few items I wanted to share. First of all, we want to congratulate 2 of our high school teams for their outstanding performances. First, our Wilson High School girls water polo team won the Beast of the East Flight 1 championship. We have one of those students with us, Miss Negrini, is on that team, so congratulations. And our Wilson golf team was named the 2021 Berks County champions as well. In addition, Wilson Jr. Evan Joswak was the individual county golf champion. So congratulations to those outstanding athletes. Next, we'd like to recognize our high school with this award, Next Gen Personal Finance, which is a nonprofit with a mission to ensure every high school student in America takes a personal finance course by the year 2030, has awarded Wilson High School its Gold Standard School Award. To receive this award, a school must ensure that all students take at least one standalone semester course in personal finance before graduation. The commitment from the community, school board, and administration to a standalone personal finance course provides every student who leaves Wilson High School with the tools to be financially independent. So we'd like to recognize the teachers that make that possible for our students. And then finally, the district continues to look for ways to engage with our community. And one of the ways we do this is through community forums. So we are scheduling our next community forum for October 26th, and details regarding the forum will be shared through all district communication channels. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yes, I just want to say, for anyone who thinks that there is not fun to be had in public education, there's plenty to be had, and it'll be had on Saturday. The Wilson Education Foundation Bulldog Bash is a big fundraising event. It's this Saturday at First Energy Stadium at 6:30. I believe tickets are still on sale. You can get them online. So $75 includes all food and beverages. It's going to be a great time. And we have a lot to celebrate for this year. So come on out and have a good time with everyone. Thanks. That's it.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Schneider.
Yes, we met today. We discussed a number of things
We talked about a professional development that occurred on September 24th. I would like to, even though it's already been done, again, thank T-Mobile and Gourmand for the lunch that was provided to the teachers for that. The next professional development day will be October 11th. And what they're aiming for in this one is lesson clarity so that students understand more clearly what the target is that they're aiming for. Like, how do students know they've achieved mastery in the issue? Music will be at Millersville during that, and I believe food sciences will be at Redner's working with Chef Tim. So I asked if they needed a chaperone for that, because that sounds like a pretty good time. We have about 2,200 old Chromebooks. About 800 of those are going to go up for sale. The other ones will be reserved for parts or loaners or other needs within the district. Chromebooks are all in at this point. There was a ransomware attack on a company that we work with, but it didn't really affect anything here. The tech department's busy. Since the beginning of school through like the end of September, they've had over 3,000 calls, tickets, or emails for, sometimes it's as simple as you need to restart your computer. But yeah, so they've been busy. We got a update on trying to clean up and make the website more user-friendly. Certain icons, contact cards for teachers. They'll be starting to work on an app soon. We were informed, as you probably can expect, there was a significant drop in print and copies made last year. I'd like to see if we can do that, because we were showed just how many trees that saved, and carbon emissions and things like that. 80% of the projectors that were ordered in May are in. So we're still waiting on some of that tech. More have been ordered because we don't have a back stock, and since it took that long since May, try to get ahead of it a little bit. That's my report.
Thank you. Student outreach, Ms. Maddie Negrini.
This week at the high school, we're preparing for 3 really important and exciting events that are all occurring this upcoming weekend. First of all, being homecoming week. Our school is unique in the sense that rather than using nominations, we actually have representatives that compose our homecoming court, and they represent multiple clubs and student-led organizations. In addition to the homecoming court, there's also a carnival this coming Friday, in which all the clubs and extracurriculars in our high school will come together and run tables, including games and other activities that students can partake in. The football game this weekend is a pink out theme in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month for October. This is an annual student government-led event. And in addition to Buchanan for donations, they have been selling t-shirts, and all of these proceeds will be going directly to the Breast Cancer Support Services of Berks. Lastly, Wilson Theater Company is performing their first production of their season. The show is entitled Puffs, and it is a modern spin off of the Harry Potter novel series. Tickets are being sold online currently, and they will have their performances on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maravich.
Rules of public participation at school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. The following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending the meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comment on matters that are or may come before the board. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to any individual board member or administrator. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience permitted. Individuals may not approach the board tables at any time. Individuals shall make their comments from the speaker's lectern. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per individual, and I will provide you with a warning when there's 1 minute left. Any person making threats of any type, personal, offensive, and impertinent matter, and a person becoming unruly may be removed from the meeting or cited by local police. The above expectations are in Board Policy 903, which is on board docs on the website.
Thank you. Public participation on non-agenda items. Mrs. Cocker.
First, Tammy Keener, CRT and Equity.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. A great number of the parents here at Wilson and concerned residents of the Wilson School District have expressed to the board their concerns pertaining to the issues of critical race theory, diversity, equity, conclusions, changing of values, beliefs, mindsets, comprehensive sex education, gender identity, and welcoming classrooms, and intersexuality. I believe that the superintendent, Dr. Fadley, is the single most qualified person in the district to investigate the issues pertaining to these doctrines so that we find so reprehensible. The superintendent has overall responsibility and accountability for the curriculum, teacher training, and teacher performance in the classroom. The superintendent is uniquely qualified by virtue of his leadership, his academic research qualifications, and his management experience to quickly determine whether those undesirable doctrines have been infiltrated into our schools, either in the educational of the materials or beliefs and attitudes of the teachers. And if they are found to be present, to assure that they are rooted out and keeping with the expressed views of the overwhelming majority of parents in the district. Last meeting, September 20th, 21, I asked the Wilson School Board to give consideration to appointing Dr. Fadley to conduct an immediate and comprehensive investigation of these issues as related to the Wilson School Board. Upon completion, to give a full report of its findings to the board. I further ask that the report be shared with the public. Has this been done, or will it be done? Citizens across the nation are attending local school board meetings demanding that critical race theory, equity, as opposed to equality, and similar doctrines be kept out of their schools.
1 minute.
Slaves came to our country from many descendants. Some were even white. My ancestors are Irish and came to this country as slaves. American history is based on our Constitution and is created from actual events that our founding fathers participated in and upon which the Constitution is completely based. We are all Americans, and we live one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Randolph Blatt, Board Actions.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity once again. Many people and myself are very disappointed with this board. We are having an election, and last evening a candidate debate. And guess what? There was no debate because the incumbents did not attend. Not one attended. And one incumbent didn't even have the professional courtesy to say, I'm not attending. Wow. Back in my time, when you were running for the school board, everybody attended debates. Not one debate, but maybe a half a dozen debates. Everyone attended. Don't you have courage? Can't you speak? Can't you even respond? I asked that question. This really didn't surprise us. No speaking here, no transparency here. Next topic. Regarding the community meeting on the equity team, that was a great play, not a meeting. Let me guess. I hope none of you have a degree in math, statistics, engineering, or science, because
1 minute.
statistically, the number of participations was terrible. The N number, samples, was less than 40. It's absolutely amazing that the people who pay for this district, the taxpayers, didn't have more people there or allowed to be there, and statistically, you needed them there. Approximately 38 people. That is a real funny joke regarding input on an important topic. So still, you do not know what true community input is or what it involves. Am I finished? Pardon me? Okay, you didn't give me a warning, John. I didn't hear it. Okay. All right, I'll remember that, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Murray, Curriculum.
Sorry, one moment. Oh, good, thank you. I'm not all that technological here. Okay. Hi, everyone. I would first like to thank all of the community members and administrators who have reached out to support Skylar and help her find a path to peace in school. She hasn't quite found that yet, but she has a very loving family and community by her side. I would like to address a comment that was made by a board member at the end of the meeting last time. I'm going to attempt to play it so I don't misquote it.
I would just encourage everyone, if your child brings home something that either you weren't aware of before or you are not comfortable because you didn't know about it, that's okay. We're okay to be lifelong learners.
I appreciate you giving me the permission to be a lifelong learner. I am hoping you are willing to learn something here tonight. When parents and students are expressing their concerns or opinions, I would ask you to show a little humility and set a good example for students and the community who elected you. Instead of being condescending and trying to suppress the voices that you disagree with, maybe listen to them. Maybe the people who know the students the best are their parents. You touted your vast education and used that to parent shame. Frankly, I was appalled. For someone so highly educated, you should know better. Do not speak to us like you know our children and their needs better than we do. Do not speak to us as if you are the only one in this room who is educated. If the lessons being presented to your child
1 minute.
were all right-wing opinions, you would be standing right here where I am. We are not asking to have history hushed. We are not asking for tough subjects to be avoided or books to be banned. We are asking for information to be presented from multiple perspectives by neutral teachers to all of our children, to give them the opportunity to form their own opinion. Why are you so afraid of that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dwayne Carlson, Curriculum.
Good evening, and thank you for this time to speak. I'm Skylar's dad. I have no speech. The reason why I'm here is because I keep hearing the same thing, and I am so offended, and not just myself, but many other parents were so offended by the fact that we keep hearing the same phrase. We can't teach every perspective. It's a different perspective. To say you're teaching a different perspective would mean that you're teaching two perspectives. You're not. You're teaching a liberal agenda, nothing more, nothing less. To sit here and act like that's okay, you should be ashamed of yourself. And like the gentleman said, there was a debate last night. Many of us wanted to see you show up and at least share your opinions, your views, your concerns. Work with us. Let's find a common ground for our children. None of you could be bothered. So again, I appreciate Dr. Faley and others who have met with us in regards to our daughter Skylar. But what's been done? Where's the transparency? Have you spoke to the two teachers who told her opinion was wrong? Have you corrected the curriculum where you're given a one-sided opinion and told that your opinion must be based on it and solely on it? What changes have you made? The cartoons, have you pulled the racist cartoons out of that one section for the English class, for the 11th graders? Have you added other cartoons to give a different perspective? Our children deserve more. And if you can't give it to them, by all means, please step down. And I applaud everyone here who is willing to listen to the parents, listen to the community, and find a common ground for our children. Neutrality needs to be taught to our teachers, especially after what our daughter has experienced. She's miserable. 1 minute. She doesn't want to come to school. All her classes had to be changed. She loved school, and you all played a role in taking that from her. Each and every one of you, by letting politics into the classroom. Show us something. Show us you care about our kids and not your own personal agendas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Val Delp, resolution to ban CRT.
Good evening. I first want to thank each and every one of you, administrators, board members, teachers, parents, and community members that were invited to participate in last week's equity workshop, for your time and your work. I was able to watch most of it online, and I do thank you for that opportunity and the transparency, allowing the public to be a part of that event, even if we weren't all invited to attend in person. I do think there was some good discussion and some positive changes made to the proposed equity policy, so thank you. However, I would still like to see a resolution to this policy that includes the prohibition of critical race theory at Wilson. I know this has been suggested before, and I think there is a strong call for this in the community, which if you would include that, I think it would go a long way to appease those who are concerned about the policy. This past week, I spent a lot of time talking with the community members, asking them how they themselves were feeling about the school year so far. In conversation, a theme that continued to present itself was that parents and community members do not want political beliefs being pushed on their kids in school. CRT is political, and it is divisive, and it does not do anything helpful towards achieving equity. And if you truly believe in the idea of equity, then you should not be allowing our students to be given assignments on such politically divisive topics, which are setting our kids up to be victims of or participating in bullying. Those types of assignments are creating more inequity, making this an even bigger problem than it ever was before. And of course, in settings where political discussions are appropriate, like say a civics class, for example, I would hope that the teacher would uphold the idea of equity by allowing discussion of opposing views without criticizing individual beliefs.
Our children look up to our teachers. They need to be the example of the positive changes that we want to see for our children, to put their political beliefs aside and get back to focusing on the quality of our children's education. Please consider a resolution to ban CRT within the equity policy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Britt Crump, Board Conduct.
As parents in the Wilson community make progress exposing that our school board represents the interests of Harrisburg and DC instead of local parents and students, your supporters now revert to classic leftist tactics of lying, bullying, and attempting to intimidate us. While members of this board continue to dodge dialogue, refusing to respond at these meetings, hiding behind rules that you've set up to protect yourselves, refusing to debate people like me and the candidates, trolls like the gentleman in the front row cover for you by making baseless accusations that they refuse to back up. The last meeting, my organization, Kinetic Faith, was accused of many things, including inciting violence. If anyone took the time to listen to my recordings or my speeches and my podcasts, they would hear that I warn continually that we must return law and order to avoid violence. My organization is helping parents across the state return control of the school boards to parents. Surely we can agree that school boards should represent the parents that elected them, and that when they don't, parents have lost control of their school board. We teach parents how to practice their civil liberties and how to make progress within the system, despite how much resistance they receive from boards like yourself. Apparently, the troll is not the only one that finds civil liberties extremely threatening. Your National School Board Association this past week, is now trying to get these parents labeled as domestic terrorists and have the Patriot Act used against them. Look it up. So your trolls lie for you, and your national association treats us as domestic terrorists, all for practicing our civil liberties. I've been blessed with having the platform of a radio talk show every weekday from 11 to noon. I've invited the troll onto my program to back up what he says, and of course he denies it. He won't come on there. Now I invite all of you to debate me as to whether school boards really do conduct themselves with transparency, boundaries, and accountability. I also call on you as a board to denounce those who make false accusations to try to intimidate citizens from associating with us, and to denounce your National School Board Association for trying to label these parents as terrorists for wanting more transparency, boundaries, and accountability. The troll said that I'm a self-described extremist, but of course he failed to provide the proper context. The exchange he's referring to is where I said that if wanting to protect our American values and liberties and ensuring that parents have controls of what goes into their children's minds and bodies makes me an extremist, then yes, call me an extremist. But remember, that's a moniker that your supporters and your national association has labeled us with, while you suppress us. I call on you to face us publicly outside of this forum to address our concerns, or you will be replaced by others that will.
Craig Stoneha, Equity.
Do you mind real quick? I'd like to take a second before my time starts to thank the board. Is that okay, or? That's part, all right, that is no problem at all. No, thank you. I completely understand. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. So I was at the Equity Forum last week, and I know I'm short on time, but Dr. Hoffert, Dr. Fadley, you guys did a great job. I do agree, Randy, I would have liked to have seen more community members, but a lot of great conversation. I really appreciate the effort you put in, and it was a good experience. Now, what I want to talk about tonight was just in regard to some of the statements that were made 2 weeks ago at this board meeting. I want to dive into some of them. I really appreciate your candor. Some of you spoke very freely, and I do value that. And I'm hoping that maybe by responding to some of those statements, we can close the understanding gap a little bit. First, it was said that assumptions are being made that may or may not be correct, and that statements are being made that may or may not be accurate in the public sphere. I want to be clear that there are a lot of instances and stories that we're seeing and hearing from the schools that are showing biases are actively present in some classrooms. This is not an assumption. These are parents and students reporting out on witnessed and lived events. The people I have spoken with are trying to get the facts out, but ultimately they really do feel dismissed. If we aren't willing to accept firsthand accounts from classrooms from members of our own community, I'm not sure how we move forward. Another comment was made regarding who is the judge and jury on what CRT is and is not, and that is a great point. And I would challenge the board to maybe look at that from a different perspective and ask, who is the judge and jury of what equity is or is not? Equity can mean almost anything, based on perspective. So where do we draw that line? Is it the board or the administration who makes those decisions? Is it the PSBA or social media? Another board member at the last meeting about passing an anti-CRT policy would potentially open the district up to litigation and legal issues. Another great point. I actually looked into it to see if this was something that had teeth. There's dozens of active lawsuits currently out there regarding CRT across the country, with hundreds more predicted to be filed in the coming months. Almost all of these are by parents and organizations trying to stop CRT that is currently being taught and stop mishandled equity policies in schools. There are even reports of parents being sued by districts over opposition to CRT, but of all the schools that have banned CRT, I found exactly 0 instances of legal action. So if we're truly concerned about that, I think we might be heading down the wrong route. Finally, someone mentioned we shouldn't be afraid of new information. That's a pretty assumptive statement, pretty bold. That statement kind of assumes that the fear of information is driving the pressure on the board right now, and I don't think that's anywhere near the truth. I've met a lot of parents, a lot of people in the community, and I haven't met a single one who is worried about new information being taught in school. There is fear regarding the methods employed when teaching that information, but not the information itself. So these are not criticisms, but instead responses. I encourage you guys to please take them, as constructive feedback, and if you want to ask me anything, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Shavinsky, public comment, community equity.
Good evening, everyone. I commend the board on their equity workshop and look forward to seeing the next draft. I also would like to address the person over there who called me a troll. I think most of us probably saw the SNL skit. I guess that guy must have been cut from it, didn't make it. But, I ask, do we know the true agenda of the leadership behind the Wilson School Board Watch, the responsible parents for Wilson School Board PAC, and Connect Faith? As shown, they have an attack dog. For, the past 2 weeks, I'm sure we're all wondering, how are they all connected? Because they seem like they are. Last night, some of the write-in candidates pretended they never heard of Connect Faith and or were unaware of its plans and its goals. That's shocking, because they were all together in a town hall meeting they scheduled just last month. Connect Faith had a leader from the Wilson School Board Watch on his self-described 8 a.m. radio show, where at the end of the show, they both promoted it, saying, we're here to basically check for unity, alignment, then resolve in the community that we can. And we give some help and what we can do something about it. Did you catch that? They sure said we a lot. They're as if they're planning together. At the outro, which I think was illustrated here again, that host says, we don't give ground because we're always on the offensive. How are you supposed to work with anybody whose stated goal is to always be attacking you? Uses schoolyard names, calls people cowards. He said that to me personally. He also is calling me a troll. Schoolyard names.
Can we stop with the we and they, please? Isn't that part of the rules about not pointing people out? We're never going to get anywhere if we keep with the us and them and we and they stuff. So can we all just knock it off, please? Just, let's end it here. If we're going to make any kind of progress whatsoever, let's stop this nonsense.
Okay. So how are you supposed to work with people like that? Remember, you can do 3 simple things in response to these groups. Show up, Let your voice be heard at school board meetings like this, or email the board if you're unable to make it. Do not support groups or people that promote violence in any direction, side, or even right next to you. And vote this November 2nd to re-elect our school board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gwen Hill, Board Policy.
So one thing, real quick, before I get into board policy, yes, I know you're timing me. The curriculum, you mentioned elementary field trips, that they can't happen due to staffing. I don't know if parent volunteers can help that.
It's just a few field trips that they have to change because of the staffing at the field trip, not our staffing.
Not our staffing,
Yeah.
where the field trip is going. Got you. Thank you very much. See how good that can be when we communicate? That's an easy one. Anyway, so there was a debate last night, which you've already heard about. It wasn't really a debate. It was more of a forum, and I was disappointed because I wanted to hear what others had to say, and we just don't get that. So to use a famous quote from August 2nd, where were you guys? Where were the four board members that are up for re-election? I did want to point out something that nobody else has done, and I want to say thank you to one board member, 1 out of 9, who dialed in, and this is the same one board member out of 9 who attended the Equity Town Hall in August. It doesn't go unnoticed, and thank you. As for the 4 board members that are up for re-election, what are you afraid of? An open forum, a community discussion, just your silence to us, it's deafening. We want to hear what you think. And it can be done in, a very respectful manner. In closing, just switching topics real quick, I just want to remind you all that, parental consent, parental choice, and parental rights, they don't end when our children step on the bus or they go through the lobby of the school door. The fundamental rights of parents, is basically our direct upbringing of our kids, their education. It's being stripped away every single day. It started with this, and if it ends with this, I don't know where we're going to go from there. I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. But you guys have the power to change that. We just actually had some communication here, and that really is the key, and that's really what I want to see more of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Janakovo, Equity Plan, lacking POC representation.
So in regards to our pending equity policy, I fail to see how this body could possibly move forward with the policy as worked on last week. We've been told by this body that it's very important, in fact, a key factor in educational success, to have teachers at the front of the room who look like and represent students based on the race of the students. With those statements on record about the importance of representation at the front of the classroom, along with the long-term goals of the proposed equity plan, how can this body possibly move forward with the draft plan without including proper and at minimum demographically representative voices of color in the room? Well, I don't fault the people in the room last week because you can't possibly make somebody participate and race wasn't a selector on the form. I would urge additional and focused action to invite all voices. I did the same to this whole body last week via email. No surprise, no reply. But I still suggest that you purposely invite those families and stakeholders of color to be properly represented in the drafting of this policy. Based on your own Equity Task Force video, this body has merged the concept of equity and race as one. Despite many meetings, many communications being told that equity has nothing to do with race. So how can you now possibly move forward without more dialogue to properly include those families and stakeholders in the community? Why not ask them where Wilson's education is lacking? And why not ask them what can be done better? Are you afraid to ask them what's harmful? We're often told these conversations are hard to have. They're uncomfortable. So why aren't you having them? My first comment in this room on this policy was this was a top-down approach on the bottom populace.
I'm not so sure you want my comments to ring true if you move forward. This concept of properly representing voices in education is so important that now teachers in Pennsylvania have the opportunity to obtain continuing education credits by listening to the 5-part podcast series, Nice White Parents. It's an indicting podcast on how academia as an institution has upheld the ills and sins of the past our equity policy is actually looking to address. So at what point do we say academia itself needs a major overhaul? Isn't it time to seek a different process for a different answer? Is it after the examples discussed in this podcast, decades-long focus on standardized tests, No Child Left Behind, or Common Core? I'd urge this body to properly invite in families and stakeholders of color along with other groups so proper representation is heard and reflected and benefits all students. Failure to do so is only going to affirm the optics seen from last Tuesday. I suppose you could move forward if you're behind having massively uneven representation of the student body and community in crafting this policy. But if you move forward without those voices, this will yet be another policy directed by the nice white parents that will continue the failing legacy of well-intentioned prior policies.
Thank you.
Patrick Lehman, Equity.
Good evening. I'd like to just thank the board and the community for being here and the work that you've done on the equity policy to date. I'll also add that I'm no expert, and I'll change no one's mind this evening, but I wanted to add my voice to the community and to the voices that have spoken already. I believe we should teach history as accurately as we know it. I believe if we learn new facts about history over time, our teaching should be adjusted to be in alignment with those new facts. Before I ever heard of critical race theory, I started my own personal quest to help understand some of the inconsistencies between what I remember learning in history classes and what I've come to understand about how people of color were treated in America. In the last 5 years, I learned about systematic structures, whether they're laws and decisions people in power are making, which made life harder for people of color. I'm sure you all know, but I'll point out again, that when soldiers returned home from World War II, the FHA, or Federal Housing Administration, had a program to provide them government-backed, low-income-based loans to purchase a family home, unless you were a black soldier. Black soldiers were not eligible. If you were the developer of these communities where these homes were being built and sold, and you tried to sell a home to a person of color, your low-income loans would be rescinded by the FHA. Levittown, PA was such a community. It was created in 1947 and benefited from this federal backing. Closer to home, and per the website goreadingberks.com, Francis Collins of Allentown started a 437 structure housing development in Temple, PA called Cherokee Ranch. It still exists today. Cherokee Ranch was finished in 1953. The FHA did not allow returning black soldiers to buy homes there. I've learned how banks would draw red lines around black neighborhoods on maps and wouldn't provide mortgages in these areas. I've learned the interstate system, which had to go somewhere, targeted black communities so that those communities were uprooted and not the white communities that may be beside them. I understand this was without eminent domain, so as such, there was no compensation to the family losing a home in this matter. And I'm just touching the surface. I personally want to know more. I want to be more widely read. I want to know how and if someone's life experiences were different than mine, and I truly expect that my children's education pursue those same goals. Because it matters. Where we are today has direct ties to where we were then. We can't change where we were then, but I believe learning about it and acknowledging it with some grace, kindness, and care is the best way to point to our future together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tiffany Long, Masking.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm a parent of children in the Wilson School District. I'm actually wondering also if you guys are able to answer a question, or from what I just heard, you're not able to, or?
It's not question and answer, but if you have a specific question, administration can address that.
After the meeting? Okay, I'll just say it and then maybe you guys can get back to me after. Alrighty, so hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm a parent of children in the Wilson School District. Thank you for all of your service and anticipated cooperation of not only listening to, but also researching what I'm about to tell you guys. So, upon investigating the CDC and the Department of Education, I came across some numbers that were really alarming, including and most importantly about the funding for mask compliance. So the numbers for PA were in the billions, Wilson School District in the millions, and per student, just under $4,000. So those are the question. That's the question I have, if you guys can let me know. That is contingent on mask compliance of enforcing masks on all students and potentially enforcing the experimental gene therapy and/or testing in the near future. So I would like to know that information. Speaking of that gene therapy, are you guys aware of the CDC VAERS website? VAERS. It's through the CDC, and it reports adverse reactions to the shot. As of September 24th, and my doctor didn't even know what this website was, so maybe your doctors don't either. From what I'm told, only about 10% are reported. As of September 24th, there are 15,937 deaths, 71,036 serious hospitalizations, including heart attacks and miscarriages, and 752,801 adverse reactions that were negative in total. Back to masks. So in addition to thousands of students, suicides, including that of children, the OSHA and Harvard have come out with new studies concluding that not only are masks ineffective, but they are causing apoxia-induced irreversible brain damage, in addition to multiple other mask-induced sicknesses, as well as issues with health from suppressing their immune systems because they haven't been using them. Anyways, in addition to that, you guys, doing this and enforcing this is violating the Nuremberg Code, the constitutional human rights, religious rights, medical disabilities, and discrimination. And all of you collectively and individually enforcing this can and will be held responsible if or when these children die, if that happens, according to the adverse reactions. So in addition to that, and most importantly, you guys took an oath of ethics to protect our children and uphold their well-being and safety. So, okay. I know you know this, to protect the children. So I'm just urging you guys all, in the name of God and in the name of doing what's right, to research everything I just said and consider that moving forward. I know you guys already made your minds up and are listening to your bosses because they're probably getting paid. Also, all that money, and I just washed my hands in the bathroom, no soap and no paper towels. So I don't know where all that money's going. The end. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, President Hart.
Okay, thank you. Any other business before the board? Mr. Martin?
I hate to do this to the group, but I've been sitting on a bunch of issues that I've postponed from speaking about because of the lateness of the meetings, but since tonight's meeting is pretty quick, I'll go through my list, some of which, I'm sorry? Oh, well, a lot. It's a lot. Sorry. But some of these topics, I'll start, there's no particular order to these, so, but I'm still scratching my head over the English critical thinking assignment. Why was it presented at that point in time? When, if you look at the world around us, there was many, many more important topics that could have been discussed that have been more relevant, such as the debate of whether the UN provides any service to the world. That would have been a topic. How about women's rights in Afghanistan? How about China's rights to the Taiwan Strait? I mean, there's a lot of topics I think that could have been more mind-provoking than what was presented. So I'm just, like I said, I know in talking with some administrators, they thought it was probably not in the best interest or best time to do that, but it's just things like that I wanted to talk about last board meeting, I didn't get a chance to. So I think we got to look at the world, not only our isolated little area here, but there's a lot of topics you want to provoke thought processes. Look at some of the issues. I mean, you can throw in North Korea if you wanted. I mean, there's pluses and minuses. I'm not taking a position on anything I just said. I'm just saying there's much more virtue items to discuss than what was issued as critical thinking. Bullying in school. A parent called me about what their students saw in class the other day, and I kind of redacted this, so it might be choppy when I read this, but basically, basically the parent said that in a class, a girl walked into the classroom with an outfit that was not acceptable to some other people in the classroom, and they started making fun of her and bullying her and telling her, you know, how obnoxious she looked with what she wore. Now, this is what I've been told. I don't know if this is a fact, and you folks, the administrators can follow up on this, but it was in front of the teacher. The teacher did not stop the harassing, or did that teacher offer some type of help to the student. Now, later on, I'm told that they tried to resolve this with the administration, and that did not work. They told that person that basically that this didn't happen, and therefore it was a non-issue. I don't know that. Once again, I'm only repeating what this person told me. I'm not taking sides. But the thing that bothers me most was that one of the points was that the teacher was on the cell phone and probably was not paying attention to even see what was going on. If that's the case, we should maybe think about cell phones with the teachers in the classrooms. And after being bullied, the child started crying, and you know, it was very bad for her during that process. And to me, you know, we talk about suicides, and once again, I don't know this child, haven't met the parents, but you just don't do that. And I understand, you know, kids are pretty rough. I was rough when I was in school too, and some kids, and I regret that to this day. But I think we got to take a look at what's going on. I think somewhere we're losing control of everything. And I don't know if it's just because society today, or if it's just that we just throwing our hands up and surrendering, but we can't do that in our school. So I will talk, I have more information. I kept the names out of this, obviously, to protect the parents and the situation. Okay, let's talk about the Pennsylvania School Board Association and the National School Board Association. Who are they and what do they do? Well, who they are, they're a nonprofit organization that was put together to help schools throughout the United States. And normally, you know, they do a decent job in providing schools with some direction, but for anybody that knows the School Board Association, they're a left-centered organization, and that's okay because they support education. Education for them is their sole goal and objective. But they are left-centered, and they don't necessarily represent all the school boards, but most of the school boards do join that organization. While the equity draft that was put out, although the PSB endorsed it, it came, to my understanding, it was based on the National School Board Association's excuse me, presentation. And hold on. I lost my space, sorry. So, I mean, it's how do we get to this point? Well, if you look around this board, and this is, I'm not saying this negatively, but 7 of the 9 board members here are either a teacher, was a teacher, their spouse is a teacher, or they're employed in the education system. And that philosophy is okay, because that's where they're coming from. I do understand that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't compromise and understand each other's position. I'm kind of the sole person here that has a different type of background, and I just feel that at times there's no respect for what I say, because decisions are already pretty much made. So that concerns me, because I'm not sure that's in the best interest of education either. I really don't believe that. Excuse me. And as far as school board associations really caring about people in general, they don't. They don't care about the seniors that are being put out of their homes. And people laugh. Over 12,000 seniors are put out of their homes because they couldn't afford their taxes. They don't address those issues. My mother was fortunate. I could pay her taxes. And she lived in, her request was to die in the house that we grew up in, and she accomplished that task. But what I'm saying is, you can't just, because an organization is based on education, say it's all good. And there are good pieces to this organization, but they're also, favor certain positions that maybe the average person does not. They also try to support certain candidates for re-election. All of them were Democrats. So I think their neutrality, for me, is questionable. If in education, maybe not so, because Democrats traditionally support more leniency toward giving things to various organizations. PS Pennsylvania School Board should stay neutral, but they don't. And I'm just concerned about that. They support their own agenda, which is basically solely centered around their universe, which once again I do understand. PSA also claims they're a very transparent organization. Well, if you go on their website and hunt for their audited financial statements, you won't find that. What you will find is the Federal Form 990, which is very much useless. An audit will tell you much more information on what they do, the receipts, the disbursements, things of that nature. And I just feel that the lack of transparency, even though they state in their goal, we're transparent, I question that transparency. And finally, somebody alluded to it tonight about the National School Board Association asked the president to intervene and protect school board members. Well, I hate to break the news to him, but under the U.S. Constitution and the Pennsylvania Constitution, anybody from the public has a right to address any board member when I say face-to-face, they can call them out on the podium, and that's perfectly acceptable per the Constitution. I'm not saying that should be done, but I'm saying we need to understand that the Constitution, both Constitutions, Pennsylvania and our national Constitution, allows any elected official to be confronted I keep saying in person, but I mean through the microphone system. So we got to get away from this trying to weave the data the way we want to present it. I just think if everybody's open and say, Mike, what you said last week is absolutely horrible, I can accept that. I don't have an issue with that. But I think we're getting away from the fact that we are, as one group together, we got to work to our best to resolve these issues. And I feel that we've lost that pathway. So with that, I'm going to move on to my next topic, and that was the Equity Committee. I do want to thank Andy and, Dr. Hoffert, because I thought it was well presented. I felt that the way it was managed and controlled, there was nothing that was, I think, controversial from the standpoint of people, pounding footstone at tables or doing anything out of line. So I thought it was well put together, and I do thank Andy for his. However, with that said, the meeting was somewhat biased. When 2/3 of the people around those tables are from the educational system, you gotta, being a CPA, I gotta question that. Because you look around and say, well, okay, the outcome is all gonna be predictable. I could have predicted the outcome based on what was there. And I'm not saying that, and the passion was great. I sat at a table. Unfortunately, I was the only, I shouldn't say this. Everybody on that table was from the education. So I was kind of like the lone wolf there, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't confront the issues. But the outcome, it was a very critical table I was at, too. So sitting there listening to the 6 people in education, I could see that there was nothing there. There was nobody to confront that situation. So that group rolled on and made some recommendations, which, if there was some way of discussing it between each other, maybe that wouldn't be so harsh. But that's the way it was. And I do, like I said, the people were passionate, and that's great. And I think that's really good. But once again, you can't be narrowly focused on just one piece of the pie. I'm afraid that's what has happened. And although I know that the outcomes, they made some changes to the second revision that was given, I still feel that this is a backdoor way, and I'll explain this later, probably at the next meeting, but it's a back way door of getting CRT in it as it's written. And I explain that because the people that put this together are political science people. These people are far beyond the ability of most people to comprehend how they can interweave not propaganda, but subtle ways of getting different things to open up that door. And as written, there's so many ways of getting CRT into that policy that it's pretty scary. And I think part of that problem is because, and somebody mentioned that, everybody wants everybody's son or daughter to do well in school. But when you have presentations that anybody that has a gripe or a grudge or an axe to grind can use this as a vehicle to create issues within the school district. And that's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And I don't pretend to be a political expert either in political science, but I do know enough over the years of reading documents. I must have negotiated 100 contracts, at least 100 contracts. I know how to interweave comments into a situation where you open the door for interpretation that can lead to many, many unfunded mandates that the school would then have to pursue and fund. This is an open door for unfunded mandates. And I know the school board hates unfunded mandates because we don't like Harrisburg's mandates. So I just want to make sure we're careful about this. And I know the second reading is forthcoming at the next board meeting. And I have a lot more comments. I don't want to bore everybody with everything I've got. And finally, and I do understand the board's position, and sometimes I do get aggressive, and I understand that. But if you put yourself in my shoes, I see things differently than some other folks. It's very difficult for me to understand why we can't compromise on some of the details that are forthcoming. Oops. I'll cut this short. So I guess the expectations for each student is to, pursue a career in which they match their abilities to the best of our ability to teach those abilities. This can be challenging for some students. We need to offer solutions to accommodate the challenges of preparing students to succeed. The purpose should be not to adjust our exams or change our education process, but to ensure that students have access to learning to the best of their ability. Oops. And lately, we've been trying to find a solution to figure out how we do this. And I don't think the equity policy is that solution. Can we do better at Wilson? Of course we can. But I don't need a policy to tell me what we can do better. And I don't need the policy to tell me who to interview or who to communicate with to tell me that policy. And so too many people are stuck in the past and see equity or race as a roadblock. I see it as an opportunity for Wilson to shine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other comments from the board?
Mr. Hart, if I
Yes,
may.
Mr. May.
I think it's important for the public's understanding that on August 31st of this year, changes to the Sunshine Act requires that any motion or resolution that comes before the board is an agenda item. Proposed resolutions or additions cannot come from the floor. In order for a board resolution to come before the board for a public vote would require either the board leadership to put forth such resolution on the agenda or a majority of the board members to have that on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Any other comments?
President Hart, if I may.
Mr. Snyder?
I'd like to kind of speak to the greater community here about something to start off with that I talked about last week. At the last meeting, I said context matters, and I'd like to revisit that because I went and got the context why and how curriculum decisions get made. I talked to some of the teachers and had a presentation, which was alluded to by Dr. Kennedy, by the English, Reading, and Social Studies departments at our last curriculum meeting. And when given context, the blurbs, book covers, and images being used by some to stoke a political narrative are able to be seen for what they are, pieces of an overall lesson that when seen in context engage critical thinking. Context matters. Not only does context matter, but sourcing matters. Any good scientific researcher, or even librarian, not to belittle librarians, will tell you that. In regards to those blurbs, book covers, and images that have some so fired up, not a single parent has reached out to the 11th grade English teachers about this. Sourcing matters. And when we ignore it for political gain, we are not getting the full picture. When it comes to CRT, some don't even question finding definitions for it from websites like the Legal Insurrection something or other. Really? I needed to know more about CRT going into this than I did. And so where did I go? The American Bar Association. It's a legal theory. And the Brookings Institute. And those proved to me the lies being disseminated in the name of the political narrative. Sourcing matters. And when those whose political supporters advocate violence as a regular political means, check your sources. Simply saying at a forum, I don't really know about them, is insufficient for people who want a seat at this table. Sourcing matters.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Hart?
Yes, Mr. Negrini.
If I may, I would then, for Mr. Schneider and anyone else, a source written by Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings and William Tate more than 20 years ago, Toward a Critical Race Theory of Education, as a means of understanding this topic, I think, a little bit further, that yes, it began as a legal doctrine, but Dr. Billings has certainly had many, many discussions on this particular topic through the years, was revisited in an article written by Professor Dixon and Rousseau Anderson. So, you know, this is not just some abstract legal theory that was devised back in the 70s. It certainly has evolved in terms of discussion, and that's all we're talking about is having further discussions on this and having further understanding on this particular topic. And so I think it's in some ways, and I've read articles in the Reading Eagle and others, that I think it's intellectually and academically misleading and dishonest to say that this is just simply an American Bar Association matter. It's not. And so, you know, we can't simply just run away from this idea because it's some highbrow, you know, theory that began with the legal system. It is a way of addressing and looking at everything, including education. So again, this is just about dialogue. This is about discussion on this topic. And I have a copy of those articles for anyone here that wants to read Dr. Ladson-Billings' writings more than 20 years ago on this topic.
If I may, Mr. Hart. I'm not suggesting that we run away from the topic at all. I'm simply saying that appropriate information and background sources need to be used. Otherwise, a conversation goes nowhere.
Ms. Martin.
I did have one comment. On the latter side, I watched a movie the other night. It was a James Bond movie about 25 years ago called Tomorrow Never Dies. I recommend, if you have a chance, to look at that movie or see that movie, because it's interesting, because the plot is about a gentleman that owns all the news stations in the world and tries to make news. It's kind of, you can put it in context to today. So I'm just throwing that out. If you ever want to see that movie, it's worth seeing. That's it.
Thank you. Any other business for the board of comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Kennedy.
I just wanted to share a story. This is not a Wilson story, so that's refreshing. Through my job, I'm able to talk to many different teachers in many different districts throughout Berks County. Right now, my students are placed in lots of different schools, and one of my students came to me the other day, and she told me a story about something that happened in her classroom. The teacher had sent home an assignment. They were reading about families and backgrounds and culture, and they were doing a big project, and the teacher sent home a family tree. And the students were able to share, to get to know each other, to build classroom community. One of the students brought in a family tree and brought pictures and really worked hard on it. And it was a story about her grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And the whole class was fascinated. This was a group, I think, of second graders. And she showed pictures and she shared what her grandmother went through. And I think we can all agree that this is a worthwhile project to do with children. But one of her students, after class, came up and said, "Mrs. So-and-so, I'm German, and I'm really ashamed of what my family did." And this teacher about had a heart attack. And you know what she did? She handled it. And that's what good teachers do. They handle it. She explained, this isn't your family. The reason we learn about this is so we don't repeat it. She talked about how when we know better, we do better. And I don't know, this is all relayed from my students, so I didn't get to watch it. But from what I understand, she handled it, and she handled it well. Why are we doing this to our teachers? So that they're afraid to talk with their students about important subjects. She was genuinely afraid that the parents were going to call her up and say, "Why did you make my child feel guilty?" Because of today's political climate. She was afraid of that. And we're going to stop getting to know all our students. We're going to stop being able to have hard discussions because our teachers are scared. They're scared to make parents angry. They're scared to have their name out on social media. They're scared to have flyers with lies sent around to homes in our district. And that's not fair. Last year, I remember all of our teachers being heroes and everybody saying, "Wow, I can't imagine how you did it." And everyone was so grateful and thankful for this district because we were in person for the elementary and hybrid for the high school, and we at least got the kids in. And now all of a sudden we're treating our teachers like they can't handle it and like they don't know what they're doing. And they are educational experts. Our administration, educational experts, it's their job to judge whether or not our teachers are doing a good job. If there's a bad teacher out there, there's an administrator that's not doing their job. And I trust Dr. Fadley to make that decision. And I believe he is supporting our teachers and has investigated the teacher whose name is being wrongly put out. And I want us to think about what kind of kids we want to make. Do we want to make kids that know about backgrounds, know about different people, have critical thinking skills? Or do we want to have kids who just memorize lists of facts? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
Mr. Hart.
Ms. Clark?
I would like to kind of emphasize what Dr. Kennedy said, but take it a step further in the past. On March 13th, 2020, when all of our students came home, which we thought was for 2 weeks, obviously that did not happen. I recall thinking, oh my goodness, we have these kids in our homes now, and we have to make sure that they are entertained all day or educated, and we had assignments for them to do. And I recall everyone, the biggest heroes in the world were teachers, and how did they do this every day? And it was amazing. And now we're questioning every move that they make. And one thing I didn't point out, which I kind of wish we had talked a little bit about, are the two pieces on the human resources, 7.1 and 7.2. Both of them deal with subs, and there's a reason for that. So we've increased the sub rate, the daily sub rate, and we are going to be having a part-time employee deal with calling subs, because we are in desperate need of substitute teachers. We have teachers out for quarantine. We have teachers out whose children are out for quarantining. We are consistently without substitutes in our schools, which means that our classroom teachers have to go around and cover for each other during their planning period, during their lunch. So I want everybody to stop for a second and realize the situation that our teachers are in. So they're dealing with lack of subs in their buildings. They're dealing with catching our children up on a year and a half of either missed socialization because they were at home, remote or virtual, and for a lot of students, gaps in their education because of possibly last year, I know there were a lot of students, especially in the secondary level, that were really struggling with their class schedules because a lot of them were left at home to manage their own time. And for a lot of middle school and high school students, that was a real struggle. So we have students and teachers that are trying to work really hard and then add this extra pressure of, especially at the secondary level, teachers not being confident in what they've been teaching for the past how many years and developing new lessons to the best of their professional development and their background. The majority of our teachers have master's degrees, and this is not, as a community member said, putting other people down who don't. If anything, we should be very proud that the majority of our teachers in our district have, at minimum, master's degrees, because that is what has elevated us to be one of the top schools in the state, consistently top in our county. So I would hope that the community would be proud of our teachers achieving that level, and their consistent professional development is what is guiding them in teaching our students. So I don't think that, like Dr. Kennedy said, smearing our teachers' names on social media or out in the public without even contacting that teacher. Here's the order that we need to do, what we need to do as parents. If I have a concern in the classroom with the teacher, I'm going to contact that teacher. I trust that teacher to care for my child 7 hours a day. Rather than contacting them when I have a concern, I'm just going to go and tell everyone and come to a public meeting and share my issue without even reaching out to that teacher. Okay, we're basically co-parenting when we send our children to school. They're responsible for keeping our children, the school system, fed and safe and educated throughout the day, emotionally educated too. Making sure that when your first grader is having a rough day, that first grade teacher is going to sit down with them and have a conversation with them and figure out what's going on and help them. You trust that teacher to take care of your child all day, but you don't trust them to make the educational decisions for that child. So that's my confusion, and I would hope that moving forward, we as parents and a community are there to support our teachers and at least give them the benefit of the doubt of reaching out and communicating with them when we have an issue. Thank you.
Mr. Hart,
Thank you.
can I just piggyback on what Mrs. Cocker said? I want to also point out the systemic nature of this. So right now, teachers are under attack. Do you think high school seniors are going to want to go to college? Our best and brightest high school teachers, are they going to want to go to college to be teachers to get attacked? We're already seeing teacher prep programs historically low enrollment. It's only going to get worse when this happens.
Mr. President, there's a very simple solution to all this. Pass a anti-CRT policy, and you'll get rid of a lot of these problems because people don't trust me or anybody else on this board. Some people trust me, some people don't. Simple solution, just pass the CRT, get everybody off everybody's backs, and move on.
Thank you. Any other business for the board?
President Hart, may I?
You may.
First, I just want to apologize to the community member that I happened to cut off sincerely. Mr. Barden, just in general, I believe you can sort of, in a constructive way, call someone's name out, and I think that's a healthy thing. I think using Wilson School Board as a proxy battleground for things that are going on in social media and to take it here is probably not a productive use of time. So I hope we can all agree on that, and I'm just trying to keep things healthy between everyone. When we start pointing fingers, we're going to be at this for a very long time trying to sort this out. Two, Mr. Martin, I just wanted to, I guess, ask, before you brought up, we're all about anti-bullying, but since you brought this up in public, I'm just wondering, did Dr. Fadley or Dr. Trickett or Dr. Stout have the opportunity to talk with this parent? I'm just asking because you brought it up. It's just sort of like, I'm assuming that if this was extremely relevant, it would have been brought up to the appropriate administrators, and if not, then it might be appropriate to talk to a school board member. But, I mean, from the very beginning, we always talked about school board members should not be micromanaging what's happening in. You're the one who told me that when I first started. Well, I mean, you brought it up, so I'm just asking. I mean, if there was
I did.
due diligence.
I said I kept the names out on purpose, because I
Okay.
did not want to drag people into this. I will gladly go over who this person contacted, and they told them it's not an issue, okay? So I will give these names to whoever wants to follow up on it. It was in the senior high, so I can give you that much information. I don't want to talk about this now.
And then thirdly, with regard to equity, I thought it was a very productive meeting, watching it online, and I want to thank the community members and the administration and the school board members and the taxpayers for coming out and having a very productive conversation. What I did feel was missing from that, and I might be the stupidest person in the room here, and I was talking with Dr. Hofford on the way down or way up to the previous meeting, is I still am trying to bridge what we are trying to fix with inequity policy. I'm okay with inequity policy. I just can't still figure out the rubber to the road of what we are trying to address. There was a lot of talk, it's very high level, and I'm for it, but before we present inequity policy to the board the second time around, can you give me 5 or 10 things that we can at least start with what we are fixing? Dr. Kennedy brought up a very good point a couple of weeks back with regard to remediation for summer school. That's one. What else do we have? I mean, what other things? And we just haven't talked about it. I'm sure they exist, but help me want to pass inequity policy. But you have to give us something. Show us, and maybe this is backing into a policy, but we could do a policy first and then figure out, metrics and everything else, what we're trying to address, or data points, or let's get some data points first and address it first and then look at a policy. Am I crazy here to think that? I don't think that's a lot to ask.
That's next week's speech.
Okay, just in general, I don't think that's a lot to ask. So, and Dr. Hofford said, there are some good things that he will bring to the table to address that, but I just don't think we should go and say, hey, here's an equity policy, go, here's the first reading. Let's have a little bit more with that. And again, it was a great discussion last week. Let's continue it. Thank you.
Any other business before the board? Thank you, everyone, for your comments this evening. It is appreciated. Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider first, do you have a second? Second. Mr. Martin, thank you, everyone.